Hello and welcome to Maximum Deftones, the first talking book about the band. It was written and researched by Martin Harper, music is by Amanda Thompson, and it's read by Sian Jones. You can check out our full catalogue on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk, where you can also join our Maximum Collectors Club to receive special offers and free CDs. Alternatively, join the Maximum Collectors Club by filling in the registration form attached to the booklet inside this CD and post it back to us.
It's true that we did pioneer any sort of new sound that that we can continue to pioneer even further as opposed to just being happy with what we've done so far in music and just sitting back and making the same record over and over again.
Hip-hop and metal were the two styles featured on most of the albums sold in the last half of the 1990s. Within the world of metal, the two leading lights were Korn and Limp Bizkit, and both had produced platinum-selling albums, catapulting themselves into the mainstream and suddenly making it fashionable to like the new wave of metal bands. With thousands of teenagers supporting them, these new metal bands flourished. A number of contenders to Korn's throne appeared, with the music papers announcing every week that they had found the next Korn. In the eyes of many, however, these acts were nothing but pale rip-offs. But there was one band that most felt could easily be a significant addition to the metal scene. That band was the Deftones. Based in Sacramento, the Deftones had secured a loyal and dedicated following through years of hard work. By 1999, they were on the verge of achieving their greatest success yet, a break that might lead them to becoming as popular as their contemporaries. But back in 1988, there was no Deftones, and the four individual members had no idea of what lay ahead of them. This is where our story begins.
Our biggest goal, I think, if we do have a goal, I think our goal is longevity, To get big would be good, but I think all of us, our main focus is, if I had to ask for anything, it'd be, to keep it going, for as long as possible.
The future singer of the Deftones was born Camilo Wong Moreno on the 20th of June 1973. His mother, Debbie, was of mixed ancestry, combining Mexican, Chinese, Irish and Native American blood. From an early age, Camilo was known as Chinito, the Mexican word for Chinese, because his youthful features resembled those of his Oriental ancestors. Chinito was later shortened to Chino, and that has been his name ever since. His family never called him Camilo, and he is known to the world as Chino Moreno, even though he always includes his real name somewhere on the Deftones album sleeves. The family came from Sacramento, California, where Chino had a stable upbringing, living in the same house until he moved out to pursue a musical career. The Moreno family was a large one, with Chino being the second of 5 children and the eldest of 3 brothers. His biggest influence throughout his childhood was his mother, a local schoolteacher. Children would usually consider having your mother as your teacher as the worst thing possible, but Chino seems to have coped fairly well. A smart child, he preferred to behave in the classroom and keep any mischief away from his mother. It was Debbie Moreno who first noticed Chino's musical talents. Like many mothers, she dismissed her son's banging of pots and pans as simply a desire to make noise. It soon became apparent that young Chino had an excellent sense of rhythm, easily keeping time with songs on the radio. Before long, he was also exercising his vocal cords, displaying a good sense of melody, preferring to harmonise with the backing tape rather than simply wail along with it. Despite this natural ability, Chino had little interest in developing his musical talents and, like many Californian kids, his first love was skateboarding. As Chino got older, his wild streak continued to grow. Although he was never in trouble with the law, his parents frequently told him off for his reckless behaviour. Skateboarding opened up a whole new world of possibilities. Predictably, the crowded streets of Sacramento were the ideal place for Chino and his new friends to practice their high-speed manoeuvres. Needless to say, this led to a number of confrontations with angry shopkeepers and annoyed policemen, who all suggested that the young skateboarders confine themselves to registered skate parks, well away from members of the public. This idea didn't meet with much approval, and Chino's group continued to terrorise the streets. By his early teens, Chino had become passionate about music. Surprisingly, he had little interest in heavy metal. Whilst his friends were enthusing about a new rock band called Metallica, Chino's record collection was full of albums by British new romantic bands like Culture Club and Spandau Ballet. One Halloween he dressed up as Boy George, complete with mascara and lipstick, a far cry from his later role as leader of a 90s heavy metal band. As he grew older, Chino's tastes moved to the darker side of the British scene. And like many teenagers at the time, he began to dress in black, following the fashions of his heroes, Depeche Mode and The Cure. His favourite band at this point was The Smiths, and he grew up to love Morrissey's tales of love and rejection, the downbeat lyrics striking a chord within him. In later years, he would cite The Smiths as his greatest influence, and the Deftones would record one of their tunes, frequently playing the song live. This interest in music inevitably led to experimentation with instruments. Chino's first choice was the drums, chosen because he felt there were too many guitarists in the world already. And besides, the guitar looked a lot harder to play. Debbie Moreno was pleased that Chino had decided to develop his musical ability, but she was less than enthusiastic about the presence of a drum kit in her garage. Every afternoon, Chino would return home from school and begin practicing, continuing well into the evening. He quickly progressed, soon becoming proficient. Slowly he began to expand his music tastes, moving into harder and heavier areas. His most notable discovery was the New York group Bad Brains, who combined punk attitude with funk, jazz and reggae, turning out a heady brew of groove-laden hardcore rock. Chino was deeply impressed with their unique style, and began changing his drum style to fit Bad Brains' funky patterns. But it didn't all go according to plan. As much as he practiced, he began to feel that he would never be anything other than an average drummer. He was determined to persevere, however, and continued his practice sessions. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before Chino became disillusioned with his lack of progress and put the sticks aside. Eventually, he sold the kit and bought himself a microphone, plugging it into his stereo and singing along to his favourite records. Although this was fun, he never really considered the possibility of a career as a rock and roll singer, although his family quickly noticed just how good his voice was and encouraged him to try and take it further. Around this time, his first opportunity to join a band arose. Many of the family's relatives lived in the area, and they all kept in regular contact. One of Chino's many cousins happened to be walking across town one day when he heard music coming from a nearby garage. On closer inspection, he realised that the creator of these sounds was a 17-year-old boy. The garage had been fitted with a surprising array of musical equipment, including an expensive guitar and an equally costly amplifier. Realising that the boy had a genuine talent, Chino's cousin approached him and suggested he might like to meet Chino. The boy, whose name was Stephen Carpenter, thought it was a fine idea, and the cousin said he would send Chino round. Neither of them knew it, but the events of that sunny afternoon sowed the seeds of a very successful musical career.
The difference between a good artist and a great artist is an artist who's able to make something that's applicable to everybody intrinsically different. There's no one religion that's the right religion. There's a religion that you pick as the good religion, the one that works for you.
Stephen Carpenter was 3 years older than Chino, having been born on the 3rd of August 1970. He too had grown up in Sacramento, where his family had lived all their lives. Stephen had been an ordinary child who'd displayed little inclination towards music, preferring to skateboard and hang out with his friends. He'd purchased a cheap guitar when he was 11, but didn't devote much time to it at first, finding it hard going. Unfortunately, a pleasantly uneventful childhood was almost cut short when Stephen was 14. Walking across town one day, he was hit by a car that swerved off the road and onto the pavement. The driver was drunk and was later charged with driving under the influence of alcohol. But the damage was done. Stephen's legs were badly damaged, and he was confined to a wheelchair for several months after leaving hospital. His family sued and were awarded a large cash settlement. Although the money didn't heal Stephen faster, it did go some way to making his life a little better. Being confined to a wheelchair didn't leave Stephen with many options. Skateboarding was of course impossible, as were his other athletic pursuits. Eventually he decided that the only thing he could comfortably do was play the guitar. He no longer had to make do with his old second-hand guitar either, since he now had the money to buy himself a new one. In fact, Stephen went a little further. Within 3 months of his accident, he'd bought himself a new guitar, an expensive amplifier that was suitable for playing in large clubs, several effects pedals, and additions for his guitar, along with a 4-track recorder so he could produce his own demo tapes. All this equipment cost him several $1,000s, but the purchases weren't entirely frivolous. For a start, Stephen had significantly improved as a guitar player. Sometimes he would spend whole days in the garage playing along to his favourite albums, having taught himself. Stephen's musical tastes had originally been similar to Chino's, with a passion for Depeche Mode and Duran Duran, as well as classic rock bands like Kiss and Van Halen. Over the past year, he'd discovered heavy metal, particularly enjoying the fast and furious grind of up-and-coming thrash bands like Anthrax. In the late 80s, the Bay Area of California was famous for its growing metal scene, with Metallica and Megadeth spearheading the movement. It was these groups that Stephen was influenced by, leading him to develop a rhythm-based style that placed more emphasis on riffs and melody than extended guitar solos. Stephen's growing musical ability had brought him into contact with a number of local musicians. Foremost among these was Chi Cheng, another native of Sacramento. Chi was born on the 15th of July 1970, the son of Chinese immigrants. Like Stephen, he was a keen skateboarder, which is how the pair first met. Although they shared similar social circles, Stephen and Chi did not become friends until the accident that led Stephen to pick up his guitar again. Chi too was a musician, and had been playing the bass guitar since his early teens. His elder brother Robert had given Chi his own guitar, handing it over when he realised that his younger sibling had much more natural ability than he did. Since then, Robert has been an ardent supporter of Chi's musical career, and sometimes accompanies the Deftones on their tours. Chi's first inspiration was British metal band Iron Maiden, and they remained his primary influence, although he wasn't averse to more contemporary acts. Stephen introduced him to the new wave of American heavy metal, and it wasn't long before a musical partnership was formed. Practicing in Stephen's garage, the two friends began learning as many songs as possible, focusing on recent rock hits. Soon the limitations of just bass and guitar began to annoy them, and the pair started searching for a drummer. There are always a large number of guitarists around, but drummers are a rare breed, and they are never short of work or offers. Stephen and Chi knew of a handful of drummers in their area, but most of them were already in bands and weren't interested in joining another venture. Until they got to Abe Cunningham, that is. Abe was 3 years younger than Stephen and Chi, but he did have his own kit and he had excellent credentials. He'd been drumming from an early age, receiving tuition from his stepfather who'd been playing for 30 years. Abe took every opportunity to practice, even joining the school marching band for a few months. He eventually gave that up because it wasn't the right style of playing. The school jazz bands were better, but they still weren't right, and Abe wanted to be a rock drummer. From the age of 7 or 8, he had watched his father play blues rock at local clubs, and he quickly realised that a life on stage was definitely something to aim for.